Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the Global Cannabis Network Collective's Worldview podcast. I'm your host, Chris Day, co-founder of the GCNC. Happy to be here with you every week talking about this really weird and interesting universe that we exist in with the global cannabis industry. Today, I'm recording from Golden, Colorado, and it's a little chilly, but the sun is out, and I'm excited about that. And as I've been looking around, I'm reminded of some things with cannabis. Behind me is the Coors Brewing Company. It's an enormous facility, huge brewery, serves multiple countries. And then just around the corner are these small boutique craft brewers who serve very unique styles and niche markets. And it's always been something that I've really appreciated about the adult beverage industry is the breadth of options. And it's not unlike what we see oftentimes in the cannabis industry, where we do have some major players out of markets in Canada and North America and even Europe now. But we also have so many diverse and interesting companies that are really much smaller, but they all need people and they all need skills and they all need ways to thrive in their individual markets. And to help us sort of talk through and navigate some of that today, I'm really pleased to introduce Stephanie Powell, who is the CEO of Emerald Lane Recruitment, a great friend of the Global Cannabis Network Collective. And Stephanie, I know you are constantly on the road and you're recording today from Latin America somewhere. So thanks so much for carving out time and talking.
Thank you. And thank you, Chris. It's great to see the blue skies behind you, and I have them here myself. There's a little bit of construction noise around, but such is life. So I appreciate the patience to get this done. And as you said, the cannabis industry continues to go global. Those of us who are on that global circuit really get the privilege to see how it's evolving, where it's evolving, who's helping it evolve. And so this is an exciting conversation for us to have today.
Yeah, no, it's great. Before we hopped on, we were talking a little bit about what makes Emerald Lane specifically a little bit unique. And to me, oftentimes when you're talking to people in the recruitment space, they are in a specific market. They're recruiting people from that market to place into companies in that market. But the complexity of the cannabis industry and the way in which it develops means that oftentimes we have countries coming online that require skill sets that may not have developed there yet. And so we've got to recruit people in from other places. And you sort of serve that global role in a lot of ways. But tell me how Emerald Lane came to be and, how you decided the world would be your niche, which sounds different.
Well, great question, Chris. And yeah, Emerald Lane has sort of been this combination of factors of life and the random twists and turns it's taken along the way. I wasn't always, I mean, from a very young age, I was exposed to travel. And like my stepmother was South African. So when my family was reunited as a new family when I was 12, we all went to South Africa together to have a family reunion. So I was really lucky that my parents were able to give us that access to go and travel. And I fell really in love, although I got a nasty parasite that lasted a few years. I still fell pretty in love with the world and traveling. And right when I finished university, I also went back to South Africa and I drove across the country and I worked in, some refugee centers, and I really got to see diversity, and it became something I was really sort of wanted to be more and more a part of. So travel has always been a part of my life. I considered myself a global citizen. My career started in the federal government in Canada, where I'm from. I moved on to work in cancer management, chemotherapy, stem cell transplant planning, and then nonprofit. And I'm going to an office every day, although I lived in a big city and I love my city life, like going to an office every day, and the thought of that just never really sat well for me. So the idea of sort of working globally has always been something I was enthralled with. In 2013, I decided to be a digital nomad and started to set my life up in that way. And I actually was really fortunate to be able to take on a contract as an executive assistant for an executive for a privately held foreign exchange global company. If anyone knows that world, they probably can guess the company. I managed his office. I managed our entire global sales team. I managed all the C-suite. And so I got to see how sort of a global corporation was run at sort of the top of the top, and see how the nuances worked in different markets and different cultural assumptions in different places. And so I think that also allowed me to sort of have that diversity in my mind of what business could do. And then life took me on a journey, as you do in that sort of adventure, a little bit of eat, pray, love. And on my adventures, I met somebody who was telling me that she lived on a farm in California. And I said, well, what do you do on this farm? And she's like, it's a cannabis farm, and we're bringing the plant to the people, and we live off the grid, and we live in tents, and we're up in Northern California. And I said, she's like, we're off the grid and we don't have power and all this stuff. And I said, well, that sounds cool, but like definitely not for me. I've never even slept in the tent, and met somebody I thought I was in love with, gonna marry, these kind of stories, thought I was gonna move my life around the world for that person. And then that fell apart, and I didn't know where I was gonna go. And the person from the farm happened to be back in my hometown, and we had a few drinks, and I said I'd go live on the farm. So in 2016, which is actually 9 years ago, I went up to the farm, and I really got to learn about the Northern California cannabis culture from literally the ground up. I lived in a tent. I was with the plant all day, every day. I worked with some amazing humans from all over the world, and was able to really be a part of understanding the benefits of the plant, how it touched, how it smelled, how it felt. I lived with it. And so that was a really beautiful learning gift, and a very raw part of my life. But I got to kind of reset a lot of the challenges I'd been running from, or myself, and got to know myself as well. So I also really appreciate that time. And so that was where sort of like the plant introduction came, plus the global traveling. And then in 2018, I ended up back in Canada, and I'd been in Bali running a startup, and the farms were kind of falling apart because California. And I went to a cannabis conference because Canada was just about to legalize. There was a big conference called Lift & Co. I walked in the room in Toronto. There's 55,000 people at that conference with billions of dollars. So the hype was very, very real. And I was like, there is something here. I got to work with these people. So fortunately, met somebody who ran a recruiting firm, started talking to her, and she asked me to join her team. And so, I jumped right in, and we helped scale a lot of the Canadian market. So that was how my recruiting journey started, the third part of it. And then the other part of that is because our company was one of the first movers in the Canadian market, we were scaling all types of companies. We were already moving people a lot around the country, Chris, to kind of address your previous question about that, bringing talent from one area to another, right? We were already doing a lot of coaching, a lot of candidate movement from across, different provinces to other provinces. And then because of the notoriety we had in Canada, we started working on global roles. So actually back in 2020, I was already recruiting globally in cannabis. We had clients in Switzerland, Denmark, Portugal. My team was working on roles in Uruguay, United States, UK. So we were really already at that forefront of the globalization, and seeing the demand coming in, especially for that time, very technical sort of grow talent, and getting to really be at the forefront of how do we look at the best talent in the market? How do we assess them? And then how do we then match them to the right candidates and make sure, the right clients, the right opportunities, and make sure those candidates are ready to go. So that was really how my global evolution of life and cannabis and all of it comes together. And then Emerald Lane started 3 years ago, and I went out on my own and did some consulting, and really realized that I wanted to really focus more on the people part. Recruiting is one thing, that's matchmaking, really good at it, but how do you actually support the people before, during, and after, and help the companies also in supporting people before, during, and after? And so that's really where Emerald Lane has really taken a different approach. And right now we have clients, I've worked with clients in 9 countries and 4 continents. And so we're really just supporting that global growth from a really people-focused perspective.
Yeah, I love that. And I think oftentimes companies across industries forget that really it's about the people in the middle, right? Like, you can want to make a profit all day long, we all do, but if you don't focus on your core asset, which is the people themselves, and make sure that they can thrive, you're likely to fail, or it'll be a heck of a lot harder. Even if you succeed, right? So I do appreciate a lot that focus, and knowing where you got your start with the whole Canadian boom, which of course passed, and now you continue to look abroad at all these different markets. Where do you see the most movement now? Are we in a more pragmatic phase than we were, or where's the heartbeat at the moment?
It's a great question. Actually, somebody asked me that earlier today from the Canadian market who I was having a call with. The reality is, and I have this very honest conversation, is we'll never go back. We're gonna maybe, we're gonna get to our billion years eventually, but we won't go back to the glory days of the 2018, 2019. So those stories are fantastic, but probably belong in the history. And so we can't continue to look backwards. I think we have to, as you said, continue to look forward in terms of the markets. So the reality is the industry is continuing to grow, right? The genie's not going back in the bottle. Although there are some major developments we're all waiting for. You have the US market, what's going to happen with the new government. You have the German market, what's going to happen with the election. Even Canada, we have we're going to have elections coming up. So what's going to happen if there's a new government? So a lot of places are in this sort of wait and see moment. And of course, none of us can predict with our crystal ball. And I think that the more we sort of predict these things, most of us have no outcome knowing. It just sort of creates more of a story or narrative that's not helpful. So in terms of looking at what's developing, for us, we're seeing still a lot of demand and growth in the USA. The markets are huge. Each state is bigger than, all of Canada in terms of our revenue and sort of what's our cannabis industry is doing up there. So I think the US will continue to be a major player. And I think each of the states for now will continue to build their own infrastructure. Although I'm curious to see what happens with interstate commerce and how that can really shake up the supply chain, because we already have seen that in other places. So I think the US market is in this interesting space for that. But I'm really excited for the new markets coming online. There seems to be a lot of people who are very passionate and excited to be a part of it. We see a lot of talent moving interstate, which again is kind of like inter-country moves. So that's exciting. And then also on a global global perspective, you see Portugal, is having the cultivation kind of powerhouse for all of Europe. So you have tissue culture coming up, you have different processors, you have cultivation. So a lot of the very technical skills we're seeing go into Portugal, which I think has been really exciting to develop. There's a lot of Canadian and American talent over there, starting companies and leading companies there. So that one's exciting. We just started working with our first few clients in Germany. So that's been a really, developing market. That medical supply chain will continue to be what they're at for a long time. So I think, being able to understand that. I forget that I come from a medical sort of a pharmaceutical background with my health degree and my government work. So, I think that'll be a good place to actually leverage that knowledge and be a part of it. And then globally as well, like we have clients in South Africa. We're talking to clients in Australia. We're talking to clients in Colombia and Peru and Brazil. Like, I think there's a lot of other markets either about to turn on or slowly kind of coming online. And we're really going to continue to see that growth and that need for training local people and providing that skill set from like a peer-to-peer model from those who are coming from sort of more of the mature markets.
Yeah, I appreciated how you started that response in talking about not going back. I would tell people, and frequently do, like, you don't want to be in this super hype mode. It is doomed to failure, right? Overselling, overpromising. You just mentioned, some Colombia as an example, other South American countries. Those job markets and those cannabis markets actually ended up suffering greatly because of the overhyping of the early stage, right? And are now coming back in ways that I think have much more sustainable and long-term opportunities for folks. So I know you work sort of both sides of this deal, where you coach companies on hiring and how to be sort of people-centric, as well as looking at those seeking positions. What kind of advice do you have, especially for the companies that are looking to bring people on, in terms of how they build their teams and how they structure their operations? Because, I mean, cannabis has a lot of ebbs and flows. So how do you adjust for that when you're working with clients in all of these diverse markets?
That's a really, really good question because, yeah, there is, as much as cannabis is its own industry and we are building it, it still plays within the larger structure of business, right? And still plays within the larger structure of global. Like I have people all the time who say, oh, I want to go live in this country and work. And I say, do you have a visa? And they're like, no, but I can just go. And I was like, no, we still have to live within like the global constraints of like you're owned by a passport and you can only work in certain places, right? Like there's still sort of these global rules. And so same with corporations, came with structure, everyone's kind of understanding the intergenerational, changes right now in the workplace, the remote work, the AI, the technology, the globalization of work. So there's all these larger macro factors that we're all looking at every company. And then you have sort of the micro of the nuances or the niches of the cannabis industry itself. So I think for a lot of these companies, depending on where you are in the supply chain and where you are in the world, you're either going to have a very broad access to people who might know it, might know what you do and might have that cannabis knowledge, or you might be part of something that's really new and advanced in where you are and you don't have a lot of sort of local talent to pull from. So if you are someone, and again, we look back from some of the lessons from the early markets, I look at Canada, and although, as we said, we're not looking back at the billions, but we can look back at who were the people they were bringing in those early days. Yes, we had a very strong legacy presence in Canada and the United States that we could pull from. But if I think of the corporations, who and where were they pulling people from? And so a lot of those individuals who came in to be the early founders of these companies or the early employees, I will say, a lot of them came from really regulated industry, CPG, alcohol, bev, tobacco. You saw a lot of the translation of people who had really done that in another space and just had a different product. And then they also had an appreciation or a personal knowledge of the plant. So I think if somebody is working in a market or hiring a team, always getting those actual experiences and skill sets, because we need those people on our teams that have actually done the thing, but then also understanding their why. Right. And I think that's an easy question to add to an interview process in companies. If you're interviewing someone who on their resume doesn't show any cannabis background, asking them, like, why do you want to work in the cannabis industry? Why do you want to work with this plant? Because we all know it's a really tough industry. There's tons of ups and downs. There's tons of washing machine moments. And if you don't have a really strong why, a really strong North Star, if you don't really believe in the plant, then it's going to be hard to hold on during those tough moments. It's going to be hard to hold on when your company's going through transition or, just there's so many things that we see happen in this industry. So I think if you're a company, really understanding the why behind your team, and they don't necessarily have to be heavy users, they don't have to be consumers. It's not about trying to test people. It's just hearing their why. Because as a recruiter, I get this beautiful moment because I ask all my candidates that question, especially the people that are outside of cannabis. And I have heard the most beautiful whys. I've had tears. I've had people say, it's changed my life. It saved my family. It saved my life. It saved my parents' life. It changed my pet's life. Just these true, deep reasons why they want to be a part of the plant. And so those, to me, are the people you want to hold on to because they bring both the passion and then the skill set in whatever area you need in your business.
Yeah, I think that's good advice for every business. And I was talking to a friend today over lunch, actually, who is in the tech industry. Brilliant guy I've worked with off and on over the years, and in transition, looking for that next space. And it was interesting to hear, sort of as we continue along in our career paths, how our whys change, right? They evolve, and you always have to figure out, like, where am I today and what am I willing to contribute to? I've been in cannabis now for almost 10 years in different capacities, and my first why was, well, I want something that's challenging and where I can make a difference. And that was absolutely true back then, and it's still a core reason of why I stick with it. But I also kind of think if I knew then what I know now, I would have hesitated, right? Because you really learn a lot about the complexities of not only highly regulated businesses, but stigmatized industries that you're not fighting against reason and rational thought a lot of times. You're fighting against, over 100 years of propaganda, and how are we still profitable and build in an ecosystem that includes all of that. I think it's figuring out those whys and those stories behind what makes people tick and how they found companies and create them is one of the most interesting parts to me, of cannabis in general. And you're sort of at the heart of that, like what makes all of this stuff work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, the other side of it, and I said it, my words before, I said I would address people who are in markets where there's a lot of people from the legacy market, or as you said, we have to honor the history. We have to know where we came from. But it doesn't mean that we have to continuously repeat where we came from, right? We need to bring that into the chapters, but we have to evolve, and the industry is evolving. And so I think, I see a lot of people who come out of the legacy market and they struggle to find work. And a lot of them, again, pretty honest conversations I'm having where like the industry continues to professionalize, right? And I think that's going to be every market has a growing pain point, and I'm not going to go into them here because it would probably take the whole podcast, but I could maybe make a map and show you the pain points. But, I think some of the more mature markets, the discomfort or the new sort of clothes that have to come on is this professionalizing where it's not the Wild West anymore. And in Europe, it's medicine. It's medicine. And so it has to be regulated. And so it's not a game anymore. It's not that it ever was a game. And that's, I don't want to take away from what was built to the legacy markets, because there was people who did amazing work bringing the plant to the world. But I think, when we're starting to try to professionalize, we need to play this game. And and understanding these stigmas and this perceptions around us, we almost have to be more on our P's and Q's, right? When I hear of companies, in Canada, we had one of our early companies, there was a huge scandal and it made national news, and it still really put an imprint and a thumbprint on the industry that we were already criminals just as we got our legalization, right? And so it like created this sort of like additional level of like, well, that's what they did. And we know pharma and tobacco and all of this, they have just as much bad stuff and no one's talking about it, but all eyes are on us. And so how are we as companies, how are we as individuals working in it, building companies, being employees in this, how are we actually bringing our best work to the table, our best selves to the table, and reminding the world that we're doing good work and like doing the good work, because that's what we really need right now.
Yeah, I know you were a big supporter of our C-Suite connector in Las Vegas. And, I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but our theme was cannabis stories, and really paying tribute to those who came before, paying tribute to those who are here today. And in several of these films that we were highlighting, also championing what could be in the future if we do this right, and pulling in these different stories, because the stories are what make people inspired to work in the space. The stories are what make people inspired to create new companies. And I think oftentimes those of us who get the privilege truly to be able to travel and see these different markets and how people create things in these diverse situations, it really gives a true heartbeat to the industry in ways that you can't find anymore in like pharmaceutical, oil and gas, or even hospitality, which is supposed to be built on, creating memories. But it's all so corporatized now that it's really hard to eke those out. I'm on a riff, and I feel my old brand marketing guy coming out, but to me, it's what makes the difference and what should attract people into the space or deter them, depending on what they feel like.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think, the industry is in a space where there is a lot of transition and continued growth. And Chris, you're 10 years, I'm 9, and I'm tired. And there's moments I spent all of January pretty much offline, realizing how burned out I am. And that's up to me, and taking care of the human self. And I think all of us need to really take care of ourselves. And a part of my job as well over the last few years has been coaching people who are leaving the industry and taking some time away and giving them permission to give themselves permission that they can, that they can take some time away and the industry will still be there. I think one of the things that I really hope for all of us is, to remember that there's so many new people coming in and they're so excited, and like, let's let them have that excitement. I think one of the challenges I find is this industry tends to have this, again, it's not as good as the olden days. And so, you go to the conference, everyone's like, well, last year it was better. And it's like, well, this is someone's first conference ever. Like, let's let them be excited. Or like, from what I see is, those of us, Chris, as you said, we're on the global circuit. It's so amazing. And we know so many executives and amazing people who these are our jobs. This is part of our roles, is we have to be on the road and go to conferences and go on LinkedIn and our public personas. But like, 85-90% of the industry is behind closed doors. They're rooted in the ground in these facilities, in these retail shops, in their offices, doing the work. They don't have time to click clack on LinkedIn and comment and troll each other. They don't have time to like go to these conferences. They're not given the opportunity to. So like the industry is this huge ecosystem. And so all of us being in our zone of genius, all of us giving what we can to where we go, but then recognizing we're representing so much more bigger behind us and rooted into the ground, and bringing that ethos around the world, I think is part of the privilege and the gift of those of us who get to do it. And then also this remembering moment for those who are actually doing the hard work and the labor and building the plant, the infrastructure.
Yeah, I think we need to tell more of these stories. You and I need to pull them together, because you're absolutely right. The core driver behind this industry is what's happening on the ground, where people are doing these kinds of this work. The leaders that are pulling these teams together, the teams themselves that are helping to grow it. And we won't go into it here, but you and I after this are going to talk about how to do that series, because I really think it's needed. And it also highlights, I think, what you are all about in trying to match the right people with the right companies to create the visions, and what the GCNC is all about, which is creating collaborative partnerships so that everybody working together lifts all boats. I don't know. Seems like a good idea to me, but I may be talking to myself.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea. And I think, looking at where there's opportunity, there's again so many people who don't have their voices amplified in our industry, and so being able to kind of, as you said, share those stories amongst people. I'm in a privileged position, and the way I've structured Emerald Lane is I'm still the head of global recruitment, so I'm acting in a very rare position where I'm still screening and interviewing junior technicians that are on the ground in these facilities. I'm still talking to them. I'm still hearing what life is like for them and what they're working on. And then I'm also having the calls with the CEOs and the ownership groups across these 9 different countries. So I really get to see both sides of it. And I think a lot of business owners, depending on how they've structured their company or how they've structured themselves, especially in the recruitment side, they're very removed from the candidate, or they're very removed from the corporation. And so being able to kind of touch both of those sides, at times it's pretty busy. And, as the company grows, I have my new, lead US recruiter. So she's doing a lot of the recruitment there, and I'm doing less and less of my coaching just because I only have so many hours in the day, but it's still this opportunity to really get to know it. And I think those of us who get a chance to listen and learn to all sides of the supply chain, the more diverse we can become within our own work that we're doing.
Yeah, I love that. So, all right, I'm looking here at the mountains, and the sun is going to set behind it here in about 5 minutes. So before I get frozen out, I want to wrap this up and just ask, if there was one tip, Stephanie, that you had for someone that was really looking for that right match in the cannabis space, and they were really trying to find that place where they felt like they could thrive, but also contribute, like, either what's the one suggestion you have, or if it's some sort of mistake that people consistently make, like what to avoid, what's a tip that we could throw out to folks that they might be able to take?
Yeah, it's great. And again, along the themes, what we talked about, and we talked about in Vegas, it's tell your story, tell your unique story. I get so many resumes that are just so boring, generic, and bland. And if you took the name away, it would sound like everyone else who's a sales leader or a marketing leader. Like, be proud of what you did. Tell your story. Use your platforms. If you're using a CV or a resume, make it detailed, make it quantifiable. It doesn't have to be a novel, but make it so it's unique to you, because you've achieved so much, and your career story, your life story, your path through education and where you've got to today, that's uniquely yours. So the person, let the reader know, especially if you're applying for jobs, they let them know who you are from the beginning. And then when you go into your interviews, tell those stories, have your why defined, really make sure that you are showcasing why you want to be in cannabis. And if you're new, and if you've been in cannabis for a while, share your story. You've done so much, you've built something, you've created something out of nothing. We all have. So again, showcasing that work, highlighting it, put a portfolio together if you're in marketing, and just really making sure that you show that off proudly, have that on your LinkedIn, whatever you feel comfortable and confident sharing, like make sure that personal story is a part of it, because you know where you're going, you know where you're trying to go, and you know what you ultimately are going to be able to do to help bring the plant to the people. And so the better you can share your story, the more people can hear it and then understand where you'll be a match for and have that sort of perfect match as you just asked about.
Perfect. And Stephanie, what's the easiest way if people are interested in talking to you, either about needs their company has, or, you know, if they're looking for positions that fit with some of your clients, what's the best way to reach you?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn is really where I play. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Stephanie Powell. You can also find Emerald Lane Recruitment on LinkedIn. We're there. We're going to be turning on that marketing machine over the next couple of months. So stay tuned. We'll be adding a lot more materials. I've been doing Tip Tuesdays now for almost 3 years. There's like 130 plus, Tip Tuesday videos, which you can see what 3 years in cannabis will do for you in terms of aging. But I got
You're
some great
doing all
videos,
right.
some free videos. And then our website, emeraldlanerecruitment.com. I'm going to be hitting the conference circuit globally in a couple of weeks. We're going to be at the Women Grow event, and then I'll be at Benzinga, and then in Europe. So, if there are any of the major conferences, just find me, say hello. I'm actually an extroverted introvert. So if I'm at a conference, and just come up and say hi to me, it always makes me feel more comfortable. And yeah, we'll always look forward to talking to people either about finding a job or, again, building that dream team.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Stephanie. And I'll look forward to seeing you for sure in DC and Berlin, if not elsewhere. And to all of you out there in podcast land, make sure you subscribe if you haven't yet. And based on this one, if you're a founder of a company or a team lead somewhere and you think you've got a great story that would fit within the dynamic that we just talked about, you know what? Send it to me. I'm also on LinkedIn and not too hard to find, intentionally findable. So look at that, because it is indeed what makes this industry sort of move forward. So we'll look forward to talking about this some more in each weekly episode of the GCNC Worldview. Thanks so much, everybody. And until next time, have a great day, evening, afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. We look forward to it next time.